it would mean that you could argue that if God existed and hell existed in particular, that would be an even stronger reason not to procreate, because if you procreate, then you risk putting someone in hell forever, if that makes sense.
Yes.
It would also make me question, I guess the problem of evil would come up, and not even just the problem of evil of people doing evil things, but just the fact that, for example, like a lot of wild animals, with nothing to do with what humans are doing, they live pretty terrible lives, being eaten alive and this kind of thing. So I would question why a loving God would create a world like this, but it wouldn't necessarily mean that. My point is basically that if God does exist, it wouldn't mean that antinatalism is wrong. It might even have stronger arguments to.
But would you agree that the acceptance of a concept, hell or heaven, the understanding of suffering or the understanding of whether one should reproduce or not reproduce, that all of that, the reality of all of that, doesn't change of whether God exists or doesn't exist. It simply is, I don't find it palatable or I don't understand a particular concept. In other words, not understanding or comprehending something doesn't change the reality of whether that thing exists in the first place.
I would agree with that, yes. I think I was saying, I've forgotten your name already, buddy, but I was saying to you before that...
Don't worry, it's quite easily forgotten.
I think that I'm not, in terms of like objective truth, I think there's like a state of affairs which exists, whether or not, like, I think we experience that state of affairs subjectively, like we could both experience something and have a completely different, but there is like a state of affairs, and whether God exists or not would be like an objective fact.
Yeah, it would be.
Whether or not I could comprehend
I agree, but the thing I'm going to say to you is that, you see, just because I find a particular concept unpalatable, or I don't understand the implications or the facets, or the reasons behind something, doesn't change the reality or whether the thing exists or doesn't exist.
Absolutely, and that's really important for antinatalism.
So what I would say to you,
sure. It's not that I'm not happy about the state of affairs in the world, which is why I'm advocating for people not to procreate.
A lot of people probably are not.
Exactly, and it's not that the fact that I view the world in this way isn't because I want to view it in this way. And similarly, like, whether or not God exists wouldn't really have anything to do with whether or not I want it to.
Well, let me ask you the question, right?
Sure.
Because fundamentally, if the existence of something doesn't change by seeing certain things unfolding, and they might seem unpalatable or I might not understand them, then isn't it better to talk about the reasons to believe in that something in the first place? Because then the spectacles that we put on to judge all other matters are altered by the reality of the God existing in the first place.
Yes, just one thing about the word. When you say discuss the reasons to believe, that feels a bit leading to me. I think you could say like the evidence as to whether or not it exists, rather than the reasons to believe. So I'm not sure we should start from the premise of let's discuss all the reasons why this is true. We should maybe try and be as objective as possible. Well, again, I guess you have to start from somewhere.
The point I'm trying to make to you when I say reasons, I'm talking about established, reasoned, strong arguments.
Yes.
So it could be deductive arguments, right?
Yeah.
So that's a type of evidence, isn't it?
And that's a type of evidence, right? So for example, I believe my parents are my parents.
Yes.
I haven't had a DNA test.
Yes.
I don't stay up at night wondering whether I'm adopted.
Are they the real people?
You understand my point, yeah?
I'm not agnostic about that.
No, I know, alhamdulillah, I'm not agnostic about that, right? So the point is that there are many truths that are established as facts to us, despite not having analytical or empirical evidence, but we have good reasons and reasoned arguments and approaches to accept those realities.
Yes.
So similarly, I would say, if, for example, we look at the concept of God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, the question that I would have to ask you as an atheist or an agnostic is that, do you believe that this universe exists?
Yes.
Do you believe that it has to come from somewhere?
Depends what you mean by come from somewhere.
Well,
because the idea...
Can it come into existence by itself?
Well, in the same way that many people believe in an eternal God, I guess it's possible that there is also an eternal universe, and in the sense then it didn't really come from anywhere. If that
but
makes
then
sense.
Do you have good reasons to believe that the universe is eternal, despite most of the scientific body today saying that everything began
about 13 billion years
13.8 or 13.9 billion years ago, and it was the Big Bang, infinitesimally small down to an infinitesimally small amount of matter and energy, and then it exploded into this big bang, and around 14 billion years ago, whatever we all began. The question I would ask you is that, why would you deny established evidence and facts like that in relation to something that you think may have happened?
Well, it's not that. Again, this is going back over 10 years to my physics classes, so if I get any of this wrong,
so you're probably a lot better versed than I am.
Oh no, this is only like a college, like sixth form physics. But I remember my physics teacher saying, we know what happened, and it was like a fraction of a second after the Big Bang. We don't know what happened before then. So I'm not sure that the scientific consensus is that the universe began with the Big Bang. I think the consensus is that what we view as the universe came from this thing that happened, but that's a little different to saying that the universe necessarily began.
If you look at the works of Einstein, even the people who are openly atheists, like Lawrence Krauss, okay, I think he's written 200 or 300 books on physics, they all argue that there is a beginning of the universe.
Interesting, because I personally am not sure about that.
Now, even if we were to argue of some form of non-beginning, nevertheless, I would ask you, is the universe contingent, relying on certain things being there for its existence? And are those things necessary to be assembled in a particular way for it to function in the way that it did? In other words, is it contingent and reliant? And anything that is contingent and reliant requires something preceding it. It cannot be the explanation for itself.
I'll agree with that. So, but I guess the argument then, because it wasn't my understanding that Lawrence Krauss said that the universe began 13 billion years ago and there was nothing before then. It was my understanding from the scientists.
No, he doesn't say. He says, to be fair to him, I don't want to misquote him, his version of nothing is not an absence of everything. His nothing is something. Because obviously, using your rationale and intuition, it's completely illogical to assume that 0 plus 0 plus 0 could ever come to 1. So therefore, there has to be something that has to always be in existence.
See, I'm not too sure about that, to be honest. And this is where I was chatting with a couple of our guys before, we got a bit bogged down. And my point being that, because they were saying, like, do you agree that something can't come from nothing? And my point is that we don't have a nothing to test. And as far as we're aware, the world around us, there isn't a nothing anywhere.
I agree.
Like if you have an empty jar, it's full of molecules. So when you say that something can't come from nothing, the only time that a something would need to have come from nothing would be the beginning of the universe. And I'm not even sure that the universe has a beginning, if that makes sense.
Point that I'm
because sorry, just to finish.
Go, please.
My understanding of the physics is that the scientific consensus is that 13 billion years ago the Big Bang happened. But my understanding was they don't know what happened before the Big Bang. And even if there was a before the Big Bang, if that makes sense.
See, the point that I'm trying to make to you is that I agree that there can never be a situation where there is nothing. There always has to be something.
I don't know if there does always have to be something, because I just don't know what a nothing is.
Well, let me ask. We can conceptualize what nothing is.
A complete absence of everything.
Exactly.
Okay, yes.
So the conception. So even though the reality of it may never exist, but we can conceptualize as to what the definition of nothing is. It's the absence of everything. Okay. Now,
that would be my understanding.
In a simple example, and I've used this a few times before, if I go into a kitchen, and there's no flour, no eggs, no oven, and there's no milk, there's no cream, there's no nothing basically, zero, zip, zilch.
There's not even the kitchen.
There's not even the kitchen. Can I ever bake a cake?
No.
No. Now, if I can't bake a cake, and that is something quite simple with only a few little ingredients thrown together, even a child with her mum will sit there and make cupcakes or whatever, then what about this universe?
So just to clarify, so in the absence of, if you say nothing is the absence of everything, even potentiality, nothing is the absence of everything, and from that nothing, even in lacking potentiality, can anything come?
We don't know, because we've never seen that nothing.
I would say that you know better than that.
Well, no, but we don't know, because the only time that something would have needed to come from nothing is the beginning of the universe. And we don't know what that was like.
What you don't is you don't suspend obvious. So I would say this is an obvious thing.
I'm not sure it is obvious.
Just like the kitchen example here.
Sure.
If you lack anything to